God, man, I have two questions, but I have to. Okay, I'll go to just one.
Yeah.
Iran. I am super interested in your take on the issue of Iran. So Donald Trump is effectively threatening Iran with attacks. Negotiate with me or else is effectively what he's saying, and doubling down on we will attack you, even building up a huge amount of military force in that region, in the region of the Middle East, in order to, I guess, either threaten or to carry out some kind of attacks on Iran. Iran is effectively saying, look, we're not negotiating with you under threat. We may negotiate with you as a third party. We don't trust you. And if you attack us, all hell will break loose.
Yeah.
Russia's come out and said this will be a catastrophe if indeed Donald Trump goes through with this. Russia has a strategic partnership with Iran that includes military assistance. No, it is not Russia getting involved, but it does include some level of military assistance.
Yeah.
There are some people, some analysts, I'm not going to name names, that are going with
I already know who you're talking about. Right.
Okay. I spent the first 15 minutes of the show trashing that person.
I don't do that, not on air. So
no, fair enough. Like I said, I'm not going to name names. But they are arguing that that the US is going to have an unprovoked nuclear war with a non-nuclear country on behalf of Israel, and that this unprovoked nuclear attack is going to decimate Iran to such a degree that they have no capacity to respond. And even if they do respond, it would be existential for a country of 90 million people. But the US will be okay. We'll muddle through, even though the world economy and everything else will be effectively toast. Are you this radically confident that the US is going to be able to launch, for one, launch a nuclear war without any political consequences associated with doing so? But that Iran would lose the capability of response. I'm very skeptical of military people who say stuff like this. Give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that that's impossible. Anything is possible when with Trump is concerned, right? We should all, not do that. Not make any 100% assumptions, towards Trump's sanity or logic or
he's
anything
having a
else,
trade war with the world, right? So yeah, all bets are off.
Yeah, So, first of all, Iran has absolutely no reason to negotiate with the U.S., right? Or with Trump in particular, right? The Ayatollah has spoken about this. Pezeshkian, who was intended to be a reformist president, naively hoping to restore, improve relations with the West. Why, how's that worked out for you? But they've both said at this point that diplomacy, negotiations with the U.S. are pointless, right? Yeah. That Iran had a nuclear deal with the United States, worked out over years with Russia and other countries' involvement, and Trump ripped it up for no other real apparent reason other than it was Obama's, signature foreign policy legacy, and so he did, right? I mean, let be honest. And it was Trump who assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the very popular and charismatic and very effective general of the IRGC, whom is principally responsible, it must be said, for defeating ISIS in Iraq. And at one point, even the U.S. acknowledged that. They've got absolutely no reason to deal with the U.S. and with Trump in particular. They've given some signals that they'll be willing to talk if the Russians or someone else, is done through third party, or at least in the room, indirect negotiations. But ultimately, I have to say that my first instinct, and I'm not 100% accurate on this, or sure about this, is that the U.S. is bluffing, right? First of all, again, I think an even greater unlikelihood that the U.S. would use nuclear bunker busters, right, to go after Iran's nuclear facilities. I mean, that would be the end of U.S. diplomacy with the rest of the world, right? I mean, I think it's a step too far. I also think that if we're talking the necessity of that, the U.S. still has conventional strikes, right, that they're capable of, and bunker busting compatible, that there's not much more advantage there, right? In doing it. That being said, I don't think the U.S. has that much military capability unless Trump wants to spend the next 4 years in war in the Middle East, right? He's wasting already short Pentagon supplies of air defense missiles and cruise missiles playing whack-a-mole in Yemen, right? He's already wasted, what, $1 billion I saw burned up. To what effect? Because the Houthis are still firing missiles at American warships and in the direction of Israel, at least, and the like. And the U.S. is just wasting, military assets there. We're not talking an invasion of Iran. Okay, we're talking air and missile and drone strikes, right? But Iran is perfectly capable, as they've proven, of very significant missile and drone strikes back on U.S. military bases throughout the region, right? On Israel. You want to strike Israel? You want to strike our nuclear facilities? We can hit your nuclear power plants in Israel. How are you going to like that, right? I mean, that's Russia, Iran has strike back capability, and that's not going to go away overnight in one strike by the United States, right? I can't foresee. I simply think talk of nuclear. I could be wrong. Again, Trump. I'm going to caveat because it's important when dealing with Trump. All right. But I think that this is largely bluster, and that Trump is trying. He does not want a war with Iran. He does not want to get bogged down in that. Let's be clear. Iran will shut off the Persian Gulf. Everyone knows that, right? They will mine it. They will hit every ship there, right? They will trash the global oil supply, right? Not that the U.S. is that reliant on that. I mean, they'll take a hit, but it will stop the global economy, which will ultimately, of course, have huge effects. Now, it won't affect Russia's economy directly, again, that much, because Russia is the other major oil exporter to the world, other than Saudi Arabia there. And you can be sure that Saudi Arabia doesn't want a war there, right? You can be sure that Turkey doesn't want any part of this war. So that's going to limit the capabilities for aircraft deployment. That's why they're crowding aircraft on Diego Garcia. Well, they're not going to conduct a war on Iran using just Diego Garcia and a couple of U.S. Aircraft carriers, right? It's not that's not enough. So I think that Trump is bluffing. That would be my first instinct of what's going on here. If he's not, then the U.S. will ultimately get bogged down in a war in the Middle East. Ukraine will be done. Russian victory on their terms will be absolutely guaranteed beyond a shadow of doubt. And China will gain another decade of time to prepare. So in geostrategic terms, engaging with Iran in a fight that is still unlikely to bring down the Iranian government like, the U.S. would want, then ultimately that would be a geostrategic mistake of very large proportions for the United States. Hopefully someone in the Trump administration can see and knows that. I certainly think Tulsi Gabbard would, and among others. But my first instinct, again, could be wrong, is that this is mostly bluff and is intended to get some type of diplomatic process involved. But once again, for that, Trump needs Russia, right? If you're going to talk to Iran and Iran is going to take it seriously, Iran is probably not going to accept anyone else as that third party, but someone who has the power and leverage against the United States and who happens to be a new improved strategic partnership of Iran, like Russia. And Russia, behind this is not being said out loud, but there's always Russia's leverage here, right? Well, if you keep supplying weapons to Ukraine, we could supply more air defense weapons and electronic warfare to Iran. How you like them apples, right? Or even to the Houthis. Like,
But haven't they already been doing that? I mean, like, I would think when I was having a conversation with Randy was pointing out we need time to prepare.
Yes.
And he said this months ago,
Yeah.
and effectively working with the Russians. Have they already been supplying? I mean,
yeah, I'm sure they have, but there's
Yeah.
a question of degrees and speed, right? And amount of satellite intelligence and other things that Russia can supply, right? Russia could provide a minimal level of support to Iran, or they could, according to the terms of their partnership, or they could threaten to crank that support up to maximum overdrive, right? It's like that. Yes. But Russia almost certainly is going about what will be a slow multi-year process of building up Iranian air defense and electronic warfare capabilities, right? But months is, they can only achieve so much in that time. But again, Russia can offer all sorts of things to Iran in the event of an actual, U.S. Israeli strikes on Iran, right? So that gives Russia even more leverage in negotiations, in wider negotiations with the United States, right? Why should we not give weapons to Iran if you continue giving weapons and military intelligence to the Ukraine? We can do the same to Iran. We can do the same to the Houthis. We can to multiple partners in the axis of resistance. We don't want to, but if you make us.
I guess my feeling is Iran is a strategic partner for for Russia and China.
And China, yeah.
There is no way this will be, I cannot believe it would be acceptable to Russia to lose a regional partner to attack.
Certainly not after having lost Syria, right? I don't think losing Iran is really in the cards, right? I mean, the only real possibility of removing the Iranian government is during strikes, then to activate every hidden cell and network and saboteur and assassin and separatist movement, the Baluchis, the Mujahideen, Kalk, everything in an attempt to internally destabilize the regime while it's being attacked from without. And even then, it's very questionable. So I think Russia and China, if they see that there are serious attacks on Iran, meaning more than just air and missile and aircraft strikes, if there's an attempt at military at political destabilization of Iran, then I believe that Russia and China will do everything short of direct intervention to make sure that the Iranian government survives.
What does that mean? Everything short of military intervention.
Lots of military supplies, right? Buying up everything Iran needs in terms of oil and gas and whatever else to keep their economy running. Right, all the intelligence, satellite, other types of intelligence that you can ask for, right? What is the U.S. providing for Ukraine? And
I see.
That is what Russia and China could provide for Iran.
I mean, keep in mind, according to the New York Times, the U.S. was effectively fighting the war. I mean, they were providing intelligence. They were pointing out sites where they needed to hit. I mean, they were literally effectively running the war operation short of providing manpower.
And remember, Russia has also been providing Iran with a number of its, top 5th gen aircraft as well in recent months, right? As part of previous deals, that have been made, right? And this has been, published in the West and everything. So Russia's already providing significant military assistance, but again, it can always be ramped up, right? And often the intelligence, right? The satellite data, the Russia's GLONASS system, equivalent to GPS, right? That the value of that is, enormous for Iran to conduct strikes against U.S. military bases, against Israel, against anything and everything, that hosts U.S. troops in the Middle East.
One last question. If the U.S. does go through with strikes, does Iran take the gloves off? Like, meaning, do they say, okay, we have no longer any Fs to give. We tried to be restrained. We were restrained in attacking Israel after we were attacked. Screw it. In which case they go all out.
I don't think they go out. It depends on the scale of the U.S. strikes, right?
Okay.
They're not going. Yeah, everything will be proportional, right? If Iran gets the idea that this is intended existential to damage and then eternally destabilize the Iranian government, i.e., the only real regime change option that's available, yeah, then they'll go all out. They'll mine the Persian Gulf. They'll do a whole number of other things, right? They'll rain missiles down on every U.S. military base. They'll activate Kataib Hezbollah and the Houthis and everyone else under the sun. But everything they're not suicidal, right? If the U.S. launches a few cruise missiles, they're not going to go all the Iranian equivalent of a nuclear operation in response, right? I would venture to say that the Iranian government is a more pragmatic and rational actor than the U.S. government is.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I mean, somebody pointed out where the U.S. is the U.S. and Iran is Iran, and the U.S. gets to dictate outcomes, and the U.S. is dictating an outcome in this situation. And as I pointed out, okay, that means there's no such thing as sovereignty for any country around the globe. And not just no such thing as sovereignty, that you could want anything. We want Iran to give up the ballistic missiles. We want Iran to stop doing whatever. We want to, like, that mindset seems outlandish to me, especially in the context of what will happen to the rest of the world and the effect it will have on the United States. It just seems crazy.
That is the type of hubris that the U.S. has adopted for the last 3 years with regards to the conflict in Ukraine, and see where that's gotten.
Agreed. Mark, I always appreciate you, man. Thank you for this. I really do. Mark Sleboda is an international relations security analyst. Mark, where can people find you?
You can find me on Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1. And you can also find me on both Substack and Telegram at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
Check him out. He's fantastic. His analysis, top of the line. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it, man. You be safe.
Thanks for having me.
Always.